everybody knows, I listen every morning. My go-to show, SiriusXM NBA Radio. Frank Isola, my guy Brian Scalabrine, the great Frank Isola, joining us here ahead of game number 4 tonight. Frank, thanks so much for doing this. How is my guy Scal doing today? I mean, is he ready? Is he ready for it to be over? Is he downtrodden? Like, is he holding up okay?
He's starting to lose a little faith in his Boston Celtics with the way that they've played. They've been such an odd team. If you go back to the first round, they're losing that game 5 at home to Atlanta. They lost game 1, then game 5 to Philadelphia. They were down in game 6. Obviously had the great game 7. But, losing those first 2 games at home, especially with double-digit leads, he can't figure the team out. He says most of Boston can't figure the team out. Remember, Vegas had them as the odds-on favorite to win, but clearly they're in a lot of trouble right now.
Shouldn't I don't care for the Philadelphia 76ers. I haven't believed in them all year. I haven't believed in them for a couple of years. Shouldn't the Sixers taking Boston to 7 games been a little bit of a red flag for the Celtics?
I think that's a good point. I think I know there's a lot of noise here right now, so just bear with me for a minute. It's funny. I think the Philadelphia 76ers, you talk about whose time it is, and I really felt for the Philadelphia 76ers, their time was that second-round series. And I think if you go back to game 4, the last 4 minutes of game 6, and that's when that kind of separates the men from the boys. And in that moment, Jason Tatum, there was a great quote from Eric Spoelstra where he talked about Jimmy Butler willing the team. And Jimmy Butler could will his team in so many different ways. Jason Tatum does it by scoring. So in the moment of truth right there, it was Jason Tatum who scored the 12 points down the stretch, the last 4:14. Embiid didn't score any. And Harden didn't do anything down the stretch. And I thought right there, that's where Philadelphia lost the series. And I really thought going into that fourth quarter when Philadelphia took the lead, I said, you know what? Maybe this is going to be Philly's year. Maybe they'll play Miami. They'll give Miami a tough battle. Maybe they can end up in the finals. But that was kind of alarming for Boston. It almost as if game 7, what Tatum did, maybe covered up some of the blemishes that the team has had. Because, if you go back to now game 5, and now the first 3 games of this series, they're 2-4 in their last 6 playoff games. Not good.
If someone asks you off the street, Frank Isola, how the hell are the Miami Heat doing what they're doing? How do you try and explain it?
Well, it's funny, and I watched a lot of their games this season, and I still remember doing the game where Miami played the Brooklyn Nets in March, and that's when 6th place was still available.
Terrible loss. And
I remember thinking, we'll see the real Miami Heat right now. With the experience they have, the Nets, it's going to be the first time playing Miami in Miami without Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. But the Nets played a great game that night. That's really solidified them staying in 6th place. But Miami was the 7th seed for really the last 2 months of the season. Losing to Atlanta and being 8th, and they caught Milwaukee at a vulnerable time. Obviously, Giannis got hurt, but I think it all goes back to kind of the system that they have there. We know that you guys down in Miami love to call it culture, but it's what Pat Riley has established. Obviously, Eric Spoelstra is a great coach. Jimmy Butler is a great player. Bam Adebayo, despite the fact that he's not 7 feet tall, is really good. And let's face it, let's be fair here. Kyle Lowry didn't do anything in Miami in 2 years. He's been really good in the playoffs. And the Cleveland Cavaliers made a mistake just allowing Kevin Love to go. Cleveland could have used him against the New York Knicks. So they have, Kevin Love's been a max player. Kyle and won a championship. Kyle Lowry's won a championship, makes big money. So those 2 guys who would consider role players, they're experienced and pretty darn good role players.
Now, you mentioned Heat culture, and I hear you guys talk about it all morning. I hear my guy Justin Termini and Eddie Johnson talk about it in the afternoon. And you, Termini, you guys are like at the top of the list of Heat fans who are like, these guys, they hate the Heat. They hate Heat culture. I want to give you a chance here, Frank, because I know this for a fact. You could say whatever you want about Heat culture, but you love Pat Riley.
Oh, yeah. And Eric Spoelstra. And that's where it all begins. And when, growing up a Knicks fan, and I still remember when Pat Riley, it was announced that Pat Riley was going to join the Knicks, I was blown away by that. I said, Pat Riley is actually going to come to coach the Knicks. I said, what a challenge is it going to be for him? Because the last team that he coached, when you have Magic Johnson and Kareem and James Worthy, Byron Scott, the Showtime Lakers, even though they were a physical team at times and they were very good defensively, I said, all he really has on New York is Patrick Ewing. And what did he do in New York? He went out and found an undrafted guy in Anthony Mason. He went out and found an undrafted guy in John Starks. Does it sound somewhat familiar? Maybe what's going on in Miami now. So they've been doing this for a long time. I hated the fact that Pat Riley left. I've always said, once the Knicks got into like the early 2000s and everything was a mess, I said, every time you're going to make a management change, the first call you should make is to Pat Riley. Let him say no. Let Mickey Arison say, no, you're not going to talk to Pat Riley, because I thought he still would have been great. And he's done a great job there. And what Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra have done, you get great coaching there. But Pat Riley, since he took over Miami, he coached, Stan Van Gundy coached, Pat came back and coached, and then Eric Spoelstra. Really 3 coaches, 4 different, periods for what it's worth. And he allows the coach to coach the team. So the Miami, and Eric Spoelstra has the saying, we're not for everybody. So Jonathan, you know this. You're a player. You're going to fit in with the way we do things, because what we do is proven. The way you do things is not proven. And let's face it, a huge turning point was LeBron James's first year there. Miami had success. They had won a championship under Pat. Now Eric Spoelstra is the new coach. And LeBron, with his passive-aggressive nonsense, figures, well, I'm LeBron James. We should have a big-name coach. And essentially the message was, no, this guy's coaching the team. And think about the job Eric Spoelstra's done. And now what does everyone say about Eric Spoelstra when they talk about him? Everyone says he's the best coach in the league. So who knew that way back when? Pat Riley. Who did Pat Riley not listen to? Is the players. The players could have some input, but at a certain point, you got to let the guys who are getting paid to make these decisions make the calls. And Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, you talk about the culture, that's the culture right there. And I'll throw in Udonis Haslem, because I know you guys in Miami get upset if I don't mention that.
I love that you brought that up, because that is my favorite part about Heat culture. I'm old school when it comes to that kind of stuff. I don't like the player empowerment. I don't like the players, the inmates running the asylum. And this Heat team, maybe to a fault sometimes, because when LeBron's contract was up in 2014, he wanted some things a certain way. And they're like, yeah, that's not how we do it here. And LeBron left. So maybe it's to a fault. But you look at right now, they're back they could be back in the finals for the second time in 4 years. And you see some coaches like Budenholzer. What's going to happen with Giannis and the extension? Oh, we got to make a change. You look at Nick Nurse. Oh, I don't know. Maybe Siakam's unhappy. You look at Monty Williams. Durant, we got to make sure he's happy. Guess what? We don't have that issues here in Miami.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And guess who else wasn't happy? Mike Budenholzer wasn't happy that they didn't win. Monty Williams wasn't happy that they didn't win. It's just so bizarre that to think, well, it was working. And let's face it, Milwaukee won a championship. They won 58 games. So obviously something was working. And then you go out in the first round. It wasn't a good series. Obviously, some blame has to go around. But to be able to stick with it, everyone says they want kind of what the Spurs have. But the Miami Heat do that. Everybody says they want kind of what the New England Patriots have. Well, you have the opportunity to do that if you just stick with the right guy. And that's what Miami does. And they also find the right players. Jimmy Butler is the perfect Miami Heat player. I see Jimmy Butler, and I see a little bit of John Starks in him, and Anthony Mason, and Charles Oakley, and I see Alonzo Mourning in him, and I see a little bit of Dwayne Wade, and you see Udonis Haslem in him, where he just fits in, and he goes with the program. And what I also like about Jimmy Butler is the other night, Jimmy Butler knows in the moment of truth, I got to come through for the team, but he didn't have to have a big game the other night, and he was happy for his teammates, because Jimmy Butler is about one thing, winning. And that's the players that the Miami Heat want, because ultimately it comes down to the banners that you're hanging up there and whether or not you're competitive every year. And that really is going to define your legacy. And I think that's the Heat do a really good job identifying those kind of players. Because, Jonathan, I watch them play now, and I love Gabe Vincent. I love Max Strus, Caleb Martin. But there's a part of me that thinks Miami Heat are thinking to themselves, all right, if something were to happen and they were all to leave, we'll find the next guys that could do the same thing. That's how good they are at identifying players and developing players.
I don't want to get ahead of myself and talk about Denver. The Heat got to deal with tonight. So we need one more win here. But if Tyler Herro were to become available for the finals, what do you do there?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think Tyler Herro is terrific. Now, Brian Scalabrine, my radio partner, keeps saying, well, I think the fact that Herro isn't there, they're playing a lot different. There's less isolation. There's less with a guy just dribbling the ball, taking a lot of shots. And that is Tyler Herro's game. But I still feel, that's a talented player. And I would say Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, and the rest of the coaching staff is thinking, we want all of our players healthy. We want our best players playing. And I think they'll figure out a way. That's why I still think if you go back to that first, LeBron's first year with Miami, when you had Dwayne Wade, you had Chris Bosh, and what they start at 9-7 or 7-9,
9-8, yeah,
9-8. And I remember thinking, great players will figure it out. They'll figure out a way to make it work. And clearly Miami did that with the help of the coach. And I think, I get it. Tyler Hero's been out for a long time. I think you have to kind of, temper your expectations just a bit when you get a guy back that's missed that much time. And now you're saying, all right, here it is. Here's the NBA playoffs. Try to reach that intensity level. It's not easy. But I have to think that if he does become available, if they make the NBA finals and he's healthy, I think he'll play. I don't know how many minutes, but I think he'll make a contribution.
Let's talk about this Boston team. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Joe Mazzulla is doing a terrible job. I think it's always an easy thing for fans who are sitting on their couch and they don't understand necessarily why their team is losing. Oh, it must be the coach. He's not making adjustments, even though we have no idea what adjustments they tried to make. And maybe the players aren't carrying out the adjustments that the coach wants them to. But what I will say is, and I do think it's interesting, we afford players who enter the league in any sport to grow and get better over the years. Like a quarterback is drafted number 1 overall. He's never expected to be a finished product in his first year. Why don't we afford the coaches that, why would Joe Mazzulla be a finished product his first year as head coach at 34 years old?
That's a great point. And I think there were several missteps Boston has taken, even if they go on to win this series, which would be obviously a bit of a miracle. But, they did lose, and we've talked about this a bunch of times. They did lose Ime Udoka off that staff. And you lost the gentleman, why his name escaping my mind, who coaches the Utah Jazz.
Hardy,
so
right?
You lost 2 coaches, and then you lost also Damon Stoudemire. Will Hardy, that's what I meant to say. And Damon Stoudemire, who went on to coach college. You didn't really replace him. You could have had an experienced assistant coach come in, a guy who's been a head coach before. So if you go back to Eric Spoelstra's first year before he's ever won a title as the head coach with the Miami Heat, and they lose in that series to Dallas, there are people thinking, maybe Eric Spoelstra is not the right guy. He's kind of young. Can he really coach great talent? They're going to say that. And now look where we are now, and everybody considers him the best coach in the league. So Joe Mazzulla, it's not easy to come into that situation. Has he made missteps? I think so. I'd be starting Robert Williams if I were him. But I'm not putting game 3 on him. Come on. This is the idea that I have to get the team ready. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are all NBA players. They've been in a million huge games. They don't know how important the game is.
Yeah.
You're not showing any fight. The Miami Heat show fight. And I said this, he said after the game, we weren't ready. If I were Joe Mazzulla, I would have said something, we're here in Miami. All they ever talk about is Heat culture. Well, we have something in Boston called Celtic pride. I didn't see it tonight. And let's face it, Jonathan, because you lived through it. You think Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce are doing that in game 3? You think they're gonna have that much give up and that much quit in them? Now that, to me, that's more a reflection on the players who know they kind of have an easy out in the form of Joe Mazzulla if the series doesn't work out for them.
Heat go up by 10 early in the second quarter tonight. Celtics getting off the mat. What happens?
I think they will, because I think they realize whatever the players may say to their buddies, whatever they may say to the media. I think when those guys are in their hotel room alone at night, especially the top players, and they know, what, part of my immediate legacy is going to be defined on what happened in that game 3 and how we go out. We're capable of winning one game in Miami because, of course, that's all it is. Win one game, then you go back to Boston. They're not winning 4 games tonight. Just go out there and win one game. I think they do have enough pride to put up a fight. Doesn't mean they're going to win. Let's face it. The Lakers came out exactly like I thought they would. A little bit different, though. They were at home, so you're going to get the home crowd behind them. I would expect a different Boston team. Doesn't mean when the final buzzer sounds that they'll have more points than the Miami Heat.
Finally, Frank, let me ask you about LeBron here before I let you get out of here. Frank, there is 0 chance LeBron is retiring. I'm sorry. I think there's a little bit sometimes you lack some self-awareness. But I think that last night was, hey, instead of talking about me get swept, let's talk about me whether or not I'm going to play anymore. There is no chance LeBron's retiring.
The guy, in a lot of ways, he's brilliant when it comes to trying to manipulate the media. And if you go back, and I watched the entire press conference last night because I love those type of settings, especially when it's the losing team. It's like tonight, if Boston were to lose, it'd be great to hear Tatum, Brown, and obviously the head coach of the team. But LeBron had told a couple of stories, and one was about Carmelo Anthony because he was asked about Carmelo retiring. And he said, I know you guys are going to think I'm lying, but when Carmelo was in high school, he told a couple of stories where he prefaced it with, I know you're going to think I'm lying. It was almost a setup to say, because in a couple of minutes, I'm going to tell you something. And I know you're going to think I'm lying, but I'm being truthful when I'm going to hint that I may retire. But I think you're right. He upstaged the Nuggets. He even upstaged his buddy Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah.
Because it's Carmelo's day, so to speak. And now it's all kind of what everybody's talking about. I think he's going to come back. I think it's a way to put pressure on the Lakers management. This idea that maybe he'll take a year off, watch his son play and come back, maybe that would be in play. Maybe he's going to start the season late. Maybe he won't be available in October, November, rest up his body. But I agree with you. I don't see LeBron James going out in a sweep just without all the fanfare and everything else. I don't buy it.
Frank, everybody knows I listen to you and Scal every morning, 7 to 10, SiriusXM NBA radio. Also, folks can catch you around the horn, right? What else? How else can people see you?
I do the net games on the Yes Network. If you didn't hear, they got eliminated in 4 games by the Philadelphia 76ers. And occasionally on PTI. We'll be down if Miami wins. We'll be doing the show. We'll be doing the studios show from the arena. And then from the arena, you got to come over. Come on before one of the games.
Okay, very good. By the way, how about the New York Knicks? New York Knicks and Jalen Brunson look like the big winner next to the Miami Heat based on their performance, you know?
Well, like I said, think about it, right? Giannis, Middleton, Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown thus far have combined for 1 win against the Miami Heat. The Knicks got 2, and they had the ball down 2 late in the fourth quarter of Game 6. You know what it was, though? And Brian brought up a good point. He talks about the discipline that the Miami Heat play with, and they trust the system. They trust each other out on the court. There's a lot of ball movement. And he talked about the Knicks being the same way, where they have principles that they stick to. And obviously they're not as good as the Miami Heat, but the fight is there, and they put up a good fight against Miami. That was a fun series. I think Game 1 changed a lot. Julius Randle didn't play. Jimmy Butler. I thought if the Knicks, it's always different. I understand the series was 1-1. When you win that first game, it sets up a lot.
Great job, Frank. I appreciate you hanging out with us. Hopefully I'll run into you down here.
Jonathan, good seeing you. I'll see you in Miami.
Thanks, Frank.